In the heart of Kensington Gardens, silence hides a deadly truth. Welcome to Shadow Files. I am your host, Kyle. Your comments bring these mysteries to life. Where are you watching from right now? I can't wait to read every single one. The evening had begun with a quiet elegance that only London society could command. Beneath a crisp autumn sky, lanterns glowed softly along the broad paths of Kensington Gardens, casting their golden halos over marble statues and iron railings. The occasion was a private charity gala hosted by Lady Amelia Worthington, a patroness of the arts, whose soirees were whispered about in the clubs of Mayfair and written of in the society columns with reverent envy. Inside the glass conservatory overlooking the gardens, champagne flutes sparkled, violins played, and laughter fluttered among the assembled company. Peers of the realm rubbed shoulders with financiers, artists, and a scattering of actors who lent the affair a touch of scandalous charm. Lady Amelia herself glided through the room with a practiced grace, her jewels glittering almost as brightly as the sharpness of her wit. It was nearing 10 o'clock when the first hint of unease stirred. Several guests had stepped outside to admire the moonlit gardens, their silhouettes visible beyond the conservatory's arched windows. Then came a sudden cry, a woman's voice, sharp and piercing enough to shatter the strains of the music. The violins faltered. Conversation froze mid-sentence. Glasses clinked nervously against trays as startled servants paused. Within seconds, the cry was followed by a commotion, hurried footsteps upon gravel, and then the unmistakable word shouted by a breathless man, "Murder!" Chairs scraped and voices rose as guests spilled out into the night air. There, just beyond the rose beds, in the silvery light of the garden lamps, lay the figure of Sir Charles Ashworth, industrial magnate, war hero, and one of Lady Amelia's most honoured guests. His body was sprawled unnaturally upon the path, his eyes staring blankly at the stars above. A jewelled cufflink gleamed against his sleeve. Beside him, a silver-handled walking stick lay abandoned. The evening chill stirred the leaves, carrying with it the unmistakable weight of tragedy. Lady Amelia pressed a lace handkerchief to her lips, her voice trembling. "Sir Charles, dead, here, in my gardens." And even as guests whispered their horror, suspicion already began to flicker among them. For Sir Charles Ashworth had no shortage of enemies, some of whom were present at that very gala. For a long moment no one moved. The wind rustled in the plane trees and carried a faint scent of damp earth. Somewhere a nightbird called across the water. Then the guests surged closer in an uneven arc. All elegance collapsed into curiosity and fear. A footman tried to hold them back with the bravery of a man armed only with white gloves and good intentions. Lady Amelia, with a steadiness that was almost courageous, lifted a hand. "Stop! No one touch him! Rupert, find the constable at the park gate. Mr. Bellamy, close the conservatory doors. I will not have people streaming in and out." Her voice gained strength as she gave orders, as if the mechanism of control itself were a tonic. A small figure detached himself from the crowd and stepped to the edge of the gravel, careful not to disturb a single stone. He had an egg-shaped head set above a precisely tied bow, the gloss upon his shoes catching the lamplight like black ice. His mustaches were immaculate crescents. He bent only as far as courtesy permitted and really looked, at the dead man. Hercule Poirot did not put out a hand. His eyes travelled over the slack mouth, the heavy lids, the faint bluish discoloration about the lips, the line of the body upon the path. Straight, too straight for an accidental fall. Beside Sir Charles, the silver-handled stick gleamed. Poirot's gaze lingered upon it, but passed on, to the cufflink glinting like a tiny star against the sleeve, to the right shoe at a slightly unnatural angle as if the foot had been guided, not collapsed. Lady Amelia saw him and came swiftly. "Monsieur Poirot, by all that is fortunate. You must advise us. The police will be here in minutes, but until then, madame, we do the obvious things with the brain that the good God has granted us," said Poirot gently. "We keep everyone here. We tread nowhere that we have not yet trod. We observe what was set before our eyes without haste and without romance." His hand, she noticed, hovered in the air as though he conducted a delicate orchestra of facts. A man in a dark dinner jacket pushed forward with the assurance of authority. "I'm a physician, Jasper Whitby." He knelt, but stopped when he met Poirot's mild, implacable gaze. "Doctor, your skill I respect, but if life is not here, it will not return for the pressure of fingers. Let us not give to the future arguments about what has been moved or not. You agree?" Whitby hesitated. He was tall and lean, his hair going early to iron grey, his eyes an intelligent pale blue that could be cold. "Very well. From a distance, then, there is lividity, and the jaw is loose. No visible wound." "Just so," murmured Poirot. "And yet, what is visible is often the least useful. Pardon, madame." He crouched without touching the body and looked again, now at the path itself. The gravel lay disturbed in a small crescent near the dead man's right hand, as if brushed deliberately. A petal, dark as a clot in the lamplight, clung to the inside of the left cuff. Poirot's eyes flicked to the rose beds a few feet away, banks of moon-pale blooms and glossy leaves. He looked back at the petal, his eyelids lowered in the way of a man noting a triviality no one else would prize. The young woman who had cried out was still at the edge of the group, a cigarette trembling between her fingers as though it alone steadied her. A face made for the theatre, delicate mouth, lifted chin, the kind of eyes that hold light like cups. "Miss," said Poirot, as much invitation as question. "Lila Drake," she whispered. Oh, it was horrid. I came out to smoke because Lady Amelia's footman would not let me do it inside. I thought I saw someone. He was on the ground. I thought he had fainted. Then I saw his eyes. I dropped the lighter." She swallowed. "I didn't touch him. Your lighter, mademoiselle." Poirot indicated a slim silver rectangle half sunk in grit. He made no move to pick it up. "You came alone?" A faint, guilty pause. "Yes." "Truly?" Poirot's voice was polite, even sympathetic. She looked down. Someone had followed me, only to talk. It was a misunderstanding. I told him to go." "Who was this someone?" asked Lady Amelia sharply. Miss Drake's gaze slid across the crowd and came to rest with a curious mixture of plea and defiance upon a man whose bronze hair had surrendered at the temples to silver, whose mouth was too ready to snare. He did not look away. "If the lady means me," said Victor Latham, "I am not in the habit of skulking. I stepped out for air. That is all." "Victor," said Lady Amelia with sudden warmth, "this is hardly the time for truth." His smile was unpleasant. "Sir Charles fancied himself a patron of the arts, and Miss Drake is excellent at being patronized. That is what this is, Amelia, untidy patronage ending in scandal." Miss Drake's cheeks flamed. "You hateful man," she said in a low voice. "Enough," said Poirot, and though he had not raised his tone, it carried like a bell through the murmur. "The time is not for the quarrels of the salon. It is for the order." He looked across the shifting faces and in each found something different. Fear gilded as outrage, shock that was also relief, and avidity scarcely concealed. "It will be necessary that no one departs. You will all be so amiable as to return to the conservatory and wait there. Monsieur Finch," he addressed the butler who had materialized with the beautiful discretion of his kind, "you will keep a list with the hour at which each person went in or out from the garden since 9 o'clock. You will ask the footman, the coachman, the musicians, everyone. You will do it with kindness, with firmness." "Yes, sir," said Rupert Finch, already drawing a small notebook from his pocket. The police whistle sounded faintly from the broad walk. Lady Amelia closed her eyes once, briefly at the vulgarity of it, and opened them again. "Marina," she said suddenly, "you should come inside." "You are trembling." A woman stepped forward whose shimmering dress gave her the air of a figure cut from a moonbeam. She was younger than the dead man by decades, 25 perhaps, and the whiteness of her skin against the pearls at her throat made the pearls look tawny. Her hands, gloved to the elbow, were composed. Only the pulse at her throat betrayed her. "I will wait where Monsieur Poirot wishes," she said. Her accent was faint, a memory of somewhere on the Adriatic. The S's were soft. "I had spoken with my husband at 9:30. We had arranged to leave by 11. We were not—" She inhaled. "We were not happy to remain longer." "Madame Ashworth," said Poirot courteously. Her gaze flicked quick as a minnow to Lila Drake. A muscle tightened along her jaw. Another man hovered, avoiding the body's line like a superstitious sailor steering wide of a reef. He had the deep shoulders of a soldier, a ferret's quickness in the eyes, and his hair was clipped with barrack's precision. The silver-handled stick, fox head for a knob, tiny ruby eyes, drew his attention like a magnet. "That's mine." Lady Amelia turned, startled. "Colonel Wren." "Yours?" Colonel Peregrine Wren gave a short nod. "Yes. It went missing from the cloakroom after the toast. I complained to that boy with the spots. My cloakroom ticket was in order, but the stick was gone all the same. I'd been searching when—" He gestured at Sir Charles with the impatient helplessness of men who loathe helplessness. "Dash it all." "Your name is upon it?" asked Poirot. "Inside the ferrule, a maker's mark and my initials. Wren by name, Fox by stick, eh?" He attempted a grin and failed. "I'd thank you not to let anyone say I laid it beside the poor devil. We were at Mons together, Ashworth and I, but that doesn't mean we were friends." "Indeed?" murmured Poirot. "And yet memories are obligations, sometimes agreeable, sometimes the reverse." His eyes returned to the stick. He did not pick it up. The ruby eyes caught the light and gave it back with a baleful glitter. "Monsieur Finch, perhaps you can confirm the Colonel's complaint." "I can, sir. The Colonel spoke to young Samuel at 9:55. "So." Poirot's gaze skimmed the semicircle again. "Madame, I would wish that no one smokes, drinks, or washes hands until the police have done their formalities. It is inconvenient, but to be the guest of the tragedy is always inconvenient." A ripple of uncertain laughter, then a shuffling obedience as the party began to ebb towards the conservatory. Only a handful remained. Lady Amelia, Marina Ashworth, Victor Latham, Miss Drake, Colonel Wren, Dr. Whitby, a square-jawed financier named Felix Harrow, whose restless lower lip suggested a man in constant negotiation even with himself, and the butler, as reliable as the North Star. The constable arrived at last, breath clouding, notebook already open. He looked from the body to Poirot, and then to Lady Amelia, with the bewildered determination of a man who had rehearsed speeches for burglars and drunkards, not for the best-dressed people in London and a body among roses. Poirot bowed and stood a little aside, offering assistance without presumption. The constable stammered through his questions and was in the midst of blowing his whistle again, this time for a superior, when Poirot said mildly, "If you would permit, officer, before the disturbance becomes greater, may I request that the immediate path be cordoned with the chairs from the terrace, and that the cloakroom be closed? There is a stick that has moved about tonight like a character in a farce." The officer, grateful for direction, obeyed. Poirot remained very still, his senses collecting the scene as a spider collects tremors along a web. There had been a toast at 9:30, he had observed Sir Charles then. Florid, erect, fingers firm upon the stem of a glass, the heavy jaw working as he delivered sentiments on art and industry. At 9:45, he had watched Latham and Drake pass through the archway to the terrace, 5 seconds apart but scented with the same impatience. Marina Ashworth had disappeared for some minutes, 10, 12, and returned paler than when she left. Colonel Wren had prowled like a terrier denied a rat, muttering about a missing stick. Lady Amelia had never once ceased smiling, until the cry. He moved at last, not towards the body, but to the fringe of the rose bed, and there he stooped. Between the glossy leaves lay a scrap of paper half hidden by grit, folded once and then again to the size of a postage stamp. Without touching it, he called to the constable, who, with tongs produced from some astonishing pocket, lifted it carefully and passed it to Poirot to read. Poirot shook his head very slightly. "Non, officer. You will read it and note it and place it where it will not vanish. I will content myself with eyes." But as the officer unfolded the paper, he read aloud, "Diana, 10. Come alone. M." Lady Amelia's hand tightened on Poirot's sleeve. "The statue," she said. "The bronze of Diana, by the fountain at the far path. Anyone in the gardens knows it." "M," said Victor Latham grimly. "Marina? Miss Drake? Or perhaps M for money. Sir Charles always did business at inconvenient hours." Marina did not flinch, but her voice had acquired a brittle music. "You are coarse, Victor, and stupid. My husband would not have met me by a statue like a schoolgirl." Miss Drake made a sound that could have been a laugh and could have been a sob. "If ever a man wrote notes like that," she said, "he would sign his whole name. He liked to see it." "You were outside at 10, mademoiselle?" asked Poirot. "I came out just before," she answered. "It could have been a few minutes after." "I don't know. I wasn't timing my shame." "Shame," murmured Felix Harrow, alert now as a hound. "An indiscretion, Miss Drake." She lifted her chin. "A temper, Mr. Harrow. I quarrelled with a fool, if you must know, and I did it where people would not see." "Not with Sir Charles?" said Marina quickly. "No." The actress's eyes flashed. "With Mr. Latham. He speaks filth in the tone of advice." The glance she threw at Marina was unkind, even triumphant. Poirot watched the glance more closely than the words. The superior finally came, a sturdy inspector with the face of a man who has made a long acquaintance with human frailty and is resigned to it. "Inspector Mallory," he introduced himself briskly, and then, recognizing Poirot, tempered briskness with respect. "Monsieur, I am not displeased to find you under a lamplight at Kensington instead of in some foreign catastrophe." "I also am not displeased," said Poirot. "You will permit that we put in order the people. There is a list begun, the cloakroom is closed, and here is a small note that pretends to be larger than it is." Mallory glanced at the paper and grunted. "We'll see. Right, everyone back inside, and you, Finch, keep that door. No one leaves till I'm satisfied." He crouched by the body, peering without touching, and sniffed the air with a faint frown. "Do you smell—" He stopped and shook his head. "Number, perhaps, I imagine. Dr. Whitby, you'll attend when the surgeon comes." Poirot stood a little apart as the group drifted in under orders. He had not missed the swift movement when Mallory mentioned smell. Whitby's eyes had sharpened, then carefully dulled. He had not missed that Marina's gloves were immaculate, but the fastening at her left wrist had been rehung in haste, the loop twisted, nor that Colonel Wren, blustering about his stick, had not once looked fully at the dead man's face, nor that Victor Latham's fingers worried at his cuff with the unconsciousness of a man who has lost something small and cannot yet admit it to himself. Above all, he had not missed the dark petal caught at Sir Charles's cuff, where no dark rose grew. A little flag from someone else's garden entirely. "Order," he murmured to himself, "a private commandment. First, the order." He turned towards the conservatory, where the music had ceased and the crystal was mute, and the company, trapped with their reflections in all that glass, had nowhere to look but at themselves. The night breathed out behind him, cool and watchful. In the gardens, a statue aimed her arrow forever at the sky. A man lay fallen below her, and Hercule Poirot, who placed his faith not in statues or in arrows, but in the littlest of grey cells, walked towards the voices, ready to begin. The conservatory, once filled with a symphony of polite laughter and tinkling glasses. now carried the silence of a tomb. The guests had been herded back inside by Inspector Mallory, and though the footmen attempted to maintain some semblance of decorum, the air was heavy with suspicion. The violins were still, the champagne lay untouched, the lamps glowed too brightly for comfort. The gilded setting now framed a tableau of unease, each figure holding their place in a theatre of dread. Poirot entered last, his shoes clicking softly on the marble floor. He paused at the threshold and surveyed the room. To his eyes, it was not merely a gathering of society's glittering faces, but a collection of puzzles, each mask of civility concealing a knot of motives, secrets, and fears. He smoothed his mustache and allowed himself a small nod, as though taking possession of the stage. Inspector Mallory moved briskly to the center, his notes already open. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying the authority of duty, "you understand why we must speak with each of you in turn. Sir Charles Ashworth is dead. Until the doctor confirms the precise cause, we must regard it as suspicious. You will all answer questions plainly and remain here until released." A murmur of discontent traveled among the guests, but Mallory raised a hand. "This is no imposition compared to the matter of a man's life. We'll begin with what each of you did between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. Monsieur Poirot has kindly agreed to observe, as his experience in such matters is considerable." Poirot inclined his head with modest grace. "Merci, Inspector. I shall observe, yes, and perhaps I shall ask the little questions, the ones that are so foolish they are not asked by others, but often it is the foolish question that leads to wisdom." Lady Amelia Worthington, the hostess, stood nearest to Mallory. Her pearl necklace quivered with her breath, though her expression was composed. "I remained in the conservatory the entire time," she said firmly. "I was speaking with Mr. Harrow about the charity's accounts until the scream drew us outside." Felix Harrow, the financier, nodded, though his lips twitched as though he would rather be in negotiation than under interrogation. "Indeed, Inspector, Lady Amelia speaks truly. We were reviewing figures. Sir Charles had contributed generously, though." He hesitated, his restless mouth twitching again. "Though we differed on how the funds should be directed." "Differed how?" Mallory asked sharply. Harrow spread his hands. He was determined to control the board, dictating projects as though we were his clerks. I argued for transparency. Hardly a motive for violence, unless you think I stabbed him with an abacus. His smile was thin, but beneath it, Poirot detected a tremor of resentment. Poirot's eyes rested on Harrow thoughtfully. "Monsieur, sometimes it is not the abacus that kills, but the humiliation in the arithmetic." He let the words hang before moving on. Colonel Peregrine Wren, arms crossed, shifted impatiently. "My stick was taken from the cloakroom. I went in search of it. Spoke to that boy Samuel, as Finch confirmed. I prowled the corridor outside until the cry went up. You'll not find me stabbing old comrades in gardens." Poirot raised a finger. "Ah, but Colonel, do you not find it curious that your stick, which you sought, was found beside the body you did not wish to harm? A coincidence, yes?" Wren bristled. "A damned nuisance is what it is. Someone planted it there to smear me." "And why should they wish to smear you, Colonel?" Poirot's gaze was mild. Wren's jaw worked. "Ask Sir Charles. He had a tongue sharper than shrapnel. He never forgave me for disagreeing with his factory contracts after the war. Called me a failure in front of half the club." His voice dropped, unwilling. "He liked to break men. But I didn't break." Poirot made no comment, but tucked the words away. Dr. Jasper Whitby was next. He stood with hands clasped behind his back, face composed into the calm of a professional under scrutiny. I was in the library, adjoining the conservatory, perusing Lady Amelia's collection. I had just returned to the conservatory when Miss Drake screamed. My only interaction with Sir Charles that evening was perfunctory. Mallory narrowed his eyes. "You spoke with him earlier?" "Briefly. He asked after a mutual acquaintance's health. Nothing of consequence." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Doctor?" You were quick to say there was no visible wound upon Sir Charles, yet just now, the inspector remarked he smelt something unusual near the body, and you, how shall I say, blinked. Why? Whitby's calm cracked for a fraction of a second. I noticed nothing. Nothing? Poirot murmured. Ah, well, perhaps I am mistaken. The tension in the room tightened as though invisible threads bound each guest closer to the truth. Poirot allowed silence to stretch, coaxing the nervous. Miss Lila Drake, the actress, was next. She straightened, her cigarette long extinguished but still clutched like a talisman. I told you, I stepped outside to smoke. Mr. Latham followed me, pestering me with his insinuations. We quarreled. I told him to leave. Then I found Sir Charles. That is all. Mallory frowned. What were the insinuations? Her cheeks flushed. That I... She glanced at Marina Ashworth and looked away. That I courted Sir Charles's attentions. It is slander. Yes, he admired me. Many men do. That does not make me his lover. Poirot said gently, and yet you were the first to see him dead. A singular misfortune, mademoiselle. Such encounters with corpses, they are not given to everyone. Her eyes flashed. You imply... I imply nothing, Poirot said, raising his hand. I observe. Always, I observe. Victor Latham, the bronze-haired cynic, spoke before Mallory could summon him. Yes, I followed Miss Drake. She delights in drama, and well, perhaps I was unkind. But I did not kill Sir Charles. I have my quarrels, but murder? Please. His sneer was almost a shield. Besides, killing Ashworth would have been a favor to his creditors. Poirot's brows lifted. Creditors. Latham shrugged. The great industrialist was more show than solvency these days. I know the city. Ashworth's empire was tottering. Had that come out, he'd have been ruined. Perhaps someone decided to hurry his fall. His eyes lingered meaningfully on Harrow. Felix Harrow's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. At last, Marina Ashworth, the widow, stood. Every eye turned to her, for grief, even suspected grief, demands its audience. She kept her chin high, though her gloved fingers intertwined nervously. I last saw my husband at 9:30. We argued. He wished to stay until midnight. I wished to leave earlier. I excused myself, walked in the gardens to calm my nerves, then returned to the conservatory. When the scream came, I hurried with the others. That is the truth. Mallory's gaze sharpened. What was the argument about? Her lips tightened. Our marriage was not a happy one, Inspector. Must I parade my misery for you? Poirot's voice was soft, sympathetic. Madame, forgive me, but unhappiness is like a fire in the grate. It leaves ashes, sometimes embers. Did Sir Charles have enemies? Her eyes flickered. Sir Charles collected enemies as others collect coins. Business rivals, discarded friends, humiliated subordinates. He enjoyed his power. But he was still my husband. Whatever you may think, I did not wish him dead. Poirot inclined his head, studying her with those sharp eyes that never seemed to blink long enough to miss anything. He had noticed already the hurried fastening of her glove, the flicker of triumph when Lila Drake had spoken, the quick glance she gave to Dr. Whitby as though sharing a secret no one else could hear. When Marina sat down again, the room seemed to exhale. Each suspect had spoken, but the air was thicker than before. The inspector closed his notebook, yet Poirot knew that for all his blunt authority, Mallory had not heard what mattered most. Poirot cleared his throat delicately. Mesdames et messieurs, it is the order that we must establish. Who was where, and at what time? The minutes. They are precious. Permit me, Inspector. Mallory gestured grudgingly. Poirot stepped to the center, his hands forming a little steeple. At 9:30, there was the toast. Sir Charles stood hale and hearty, yes? All can agree. At 9:45, several of you moved. Colonel Wren sought his stick. Mademoiselle Drake and Monsieur Latham stepped outside. Madame Ashworth disappeared for 10 minutes. Dr. Whitby was in the library. Monsieur Harrow and Lady Amelia remained in discussion. So at 5 minutes to 10, all these pieces were in motion. At 10 precisely came the cry. "Is it not so?" Murmurs of assent ran through the group. Then, Poirot continued, between 9:30 and 10, someone met Sir Charles in the gardens. Someone lured him with a note, perhaps, or with words whispered earlier. Someone who had both opportunity and the courage to act. And yet, observe, there is no wound, no knife, no gun. Death came quietly, swiftly. How? His eyes swept the room. That, messe, ami, is the riddle. Not only who, but how. Silence fell like a veil. Even Inspector Mallory seemed drawn into Poirot's cadence. Poirot's gaze lingered on the actress, the widow, the soldier, the financier, the cynic, and the doctor. His little grey cells stirred. Already the pieces began to arrange themselves, but the picture was far from complete. For there remained the scrap of paper with its cryptic M. There remained the petal of a dark rose that should not have been in Lady Amelia's pale garden. And there remained the faint, elusive scent Inspector Mallory had noticed. Something sharp, chemical, and out of place amid the perfumes of autumn roses. Poirot smoothed his moustache. "Inspector," he said quietly, "the murderer is among us. It is certain. But to reveal him, we must first play the game of psychology. For in the end, it is not the weapon that betrays, but the heart." And with that, the evening moved inexorably forward, each suspect seated beneath the glass dome of Lady Amelia's conservatory, like actors awaiting their cue, while Hercule Poirot, calm and inscrutable, prepared to untangle the web of deceit strand by strand. The air in the conservatory thickened with each passing moment. Though the lamps glowed warmly and the crystal chandeliers scattered light in prismatic patterns across the polished marble, the atmosphere was not one of elegance now, but of suffocation. The guests, seated in a loose semicircle as if for an unsought performance, looked less like refined ladies and gentlemen and more like prisoners awaiting judgment. Every cough echoed. Every shifting of a silk gown seemed loud against the silence. Poirot remained standing. He did not pace. That would be disorderly. Instead, he allowed his eyes to drift slowly from one face to another. Each gaze, when it met his, flickered away in discomfort. He gave the impression not of accusing, but of arranging, assembling in his mind the delicate chessboard of motives, opportunities, and lies. Inspector Mallory broke the silence first. "We'll have to wait for the police surgeon before we can confirm anything. But," he shut his notebook with a snap, "the position of the body, the absence of wounds, it may be poison." A ripple of alarm passed through the group. Marina Ashworth's gloved fingers tightened together. Felix Harrow leaned forward, his restless lip caught briefly between his teeth. Poirot raised a delicate finger. "Perhaps, Inspector, but let us not be hasty. Poison is a word that travels too quickly. First, we ask, how does a man come to lie dead upon a garden path? Did he fall by chance? Did he quarrel? Was he summoned? The answer will tell us not only how, but who." Lady Amelia pressed her handkerchief against her lips. "Monsieur Poirot, surely you are not suggesting that among my guests—" "I suggest nothing, madame," Poirot interrupted gently, "except that one of your guests is most unfortunately also a murderer." His voice was so calm, so certain, that no one doubted it. Mallory cleared his throat. "Very well. We'll interview each of them in more detail, but before that—" He looked at Poirot, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "We must talk about this." He held up the folded scrap of paper with its scrawled message. "Diana, 10. Come alone." Sir's eyes turned at once to the widow, Marina, whose initial began the note. Her expression did not waver, but her throat worked visibly. "It was not written by me," she said firmly. Miss Lila Drake gave a brittle laugh. "You expect us to believe that? You and Sir Charles argued all evening. Perhaps you arranged to meet him for one last private quarrel." "I argued with my husband in public," Marina retorted with a dignity sharpened into steel. "I would not stoop to clandestine notes like a schoolgirl. Besides," her gaze cut toward Lila with cold precision, "you had far more reason to meet him in secret than I." Color rushed into Lila's cheeks. "How dare you?" Poirot raised a hand, and the quarrel subsided at once. "Mesdames, mesdames, let us not quarrel as if in the marketplace. The note exists. It was found by the body. That is all we know." Victor Latham leaned back in his chair, crossing one long leg over the other. His voice was a drawl, deliberately insolent. "It could have been written by anyone. An M is convenient. Marina, Miss Drake, even Mallory here if he fancied a rendezvous. Or perhaps it stands for money, which Sir Charles was always too free with other people's." Inspector Mallory shot him a warning look, but Poirot merely inclined his head. "Just so. We must not let our eyes be blinded by the obvious. The letter M is like a mask at a ball. It conceals more than it reveals." At that moment, Rupert Finch, the butler, entered softly with a tray of untouched glasses. "Inspector, Monsieur Poirot," he said respectfully, "I have spoken with the staff as requested. None saw Sir Charles leave the conservatory after the toast. Several recall, however, that at a few minutes to 10, Madame Ashworth left by the side door. Shortly thereafter, Miss Drake stepped out for her cigarette, and Mr. Latham followed." Poirot nodded. "Merci, Finch. That accords with what we have observed. The staff, they see much, because they are not seen." Finch inclined his head and withdrew, noiseless as a shadow. Colonel Wren, restless, muttered, "Dash it, Poirot. All this talk of notes and initials. We ought to be finding how the fellow died. He was a soldier, not some delicate butterfly to be poisoned." "No, Colonel," Poirot said softly, "but soldiers also die of quiet things. A drop of venom, a pinch of powder. It kills as surely as a bullet, and more silently." Dr. Whitby adjusted his cufflinks. "If poison, it must have been administered before he left the conservatory. He was in company until then. Perhaps in his wine." Poirot's eyes glimmered. "Perhaps. Yet the glasses remain, untouched since. And you, Doctor, who are so well acquainted with poisons. You would know which leaves such swift results, n'est-ce pas?" Whitby's face did not change, but Poirot caught the flicker in his eyes, the tiny tremor that betrayed recognition. Poirot allowed the moment to pass. He had no desire to trap Whitby yet. The game of psychology was best played slowly, until nerves frayed and tongues loosened. Instead, he turned to Lady Amelia. "Madame, may I trouble you? This conservatory, it has many entrances, yes? Doors to the gardens, to the library, to the hall. At such a gathering, people move freely. Was the cloakroom accessible?" "Yes," Lady Amelia admitted. "The corridor to the cloakroom adjoins the terrace. Guests could slip in and out without attracting much notice." Poirot stroked his moustache. "Then it is most possible that one could fetch a stick or place one without difficulty." His eyes settled briefly on Colonel Wren. The colonel flushed but said nothing. Inspector Mallory spoke briskly. "We will of course take the stick for examination, and the lighter too." He nodded to a constable, who collected the objects in envelopes. Poirot turned slowly to the widow again. "Madame Ashworth, forgive me if I ask. Did your husband have the habit of smoking cigars this evening?" She hesitated. "Yes. He lit one after the toast. He always carried them." "And yet no cigar was found near the body," Poirot murmured. "Curious. A man who smokes leaves ashes, and yet our path was so very clean." Mallory frowned. "You mean someone removed it?" Poirot's eyes sparkled. "I mean only that order is disturbed when the expected is missing. In a garden, the petal falls from the flower. In this case, the cigar is absent. Someone tidied where tidying was not natural. The guests shifted uneasily. Even Lady Amelia's composure wavered. Poirot allowed the silence to grow oppressive once more. Then, with a slight bow, he addressed them all. "Mes amis, I tell you this. Sir Charles did not fall by chance. He was summoned or persuaded to the gardens. There, death came to him swiftly and with design. The hand that dealt it is among us, and it reveals itself not by the weapon nor the hour, but by the psychology, the little contradictions in word and deed." His eyes, bright as diamonds, swept across each face. Harrow restless, Wren indignant, Whitby guarded, Latham sardonic, Lila defiant, Marina brittle as porcelain. Poirot smiled gently. "I shall ask you, one by one, more questions, and I shall observe not only what you say, but how you say it. For the truth, mesdames et messieurs, it slips not in the logic, but in the behavior. The little grey cells, they will find it." Inspector Mallory cleared his throat again, half annoyed at Poirot's dominance, yet aware of his skill. "Very well. We'll proceed with individual questioning. But mark my words, we'll find who had means to poison Ashworth." Poirot, however, remained by the window, gazing out toward the dimly lit gardens where the bronze statue of Diana stood poised with her arrow. "Non, Inspector," he said softly, almost to himself. "We shall find not who had the means. That is too simple. We shall find who had the need." The words hung in the air, chilling each guest as though a cold breeze had passed through the conservatory. And in the silence that followed, every heart beat with the dreadful awareness that among them, hidden beneath fine clothes and polished manners, sat the hand that had struck down Sir Charles Ashworth in the moonlit gardens. Poirot turned back at last, his face serene, his moustache impeccable. "Now," he said, "let us begin properly." And so the game commenced in earnest, a game not of weapons or alibis, but of human frailty, pride and fear, the only weapons Hercule Poirot ever truly needed to uncover the truth. The inspector had arranged the guests in a neat semicircle of chairs, as if for a lecture. Yet it was no lecture they awaited, but judgment. Each was acutely conscious of Poirot's eyes upon them, eyes that twinkled with politeness but missed nothing, not the twitch of a lip nor the restless play of a hand. The faint hiss of gaslight mingled with the shallow breathing of those assembled. Lady Amelia's conservatory, normally a place of fragrant repose, now felt like an interrogation chamber draped in orchids. Poirot took a step forward, hands clasped lightly before him. "Mes amis," he said with a gentleness that belied the gravity of the moment, "the truth, it is like the perfume of a flower. One must not seize it, one must let it come to the nose of its own accord. So, we will talk, and we will listen, and the truth, it will betray itself." Inspector Mallory grunted and motioned for the first to speak. "Miss Drake, if you will. Tell us, in your own words, everything you saw when you went outside." Lila Drake sat straight, her chin tilted in proud defiance, though her hands worried at the hem of her gown. "I left to smoke. The gardens were quiet, eerily so. I heard nothing but the rustle of leaves. Then I saw Sir Charles lying there. At first I thought he had collapsed, perhaps a fainting spell. When I bent closer, I saw his eyes, open and empty. I screamed, that is all." Poirot's head tilted. "You did not notice if he still held his cigar?" Her brows drew together. Number, there was nothing in his hand. Yet he was smoking one only minutes before, was he not? It is curious that a cigar vanishes like a ghost. She flushed faintly. "Perhaps he dropped it." "Perhaps," Poirot murmured. "Or perhaps someone removed it. One does not like the smell of cigar smoke lingering over one's work, eh?" Victor Latham let out a short, derisive laugh. "You make everything sound sinister, Poirot. A man drops a cigar, a rose petal, clings to a cuff, and suddenly you spin a web out of nothing." Poirot turned to him, bowing slightly. Monsieur Latham, you think me fanciful. And yet, when you followed Mademoiselle Drake, what did you intend? His mouth curled. Nothing so dramatic. She is entertaining, but reckless. Sir Charles had an eye for her, and she, I suspect, did not discourage him. I wished to warn her. I did not expect her to shriek like an actress on stage. Lila's eyes flashed. Warn me? You sought to humiliate me. You always do. Poirot lifted a hand. Calmly, mes amis. You quarreled, yes, and quarrels. They are excellent screens behind which truth may hide. But let us not yet decide which quarrel is important. Colonel Wren cleared his throat with soldierly impatience. I still say it was not poison. Ashworth was a robust fellow. More likely he stumbled and struck his head, or his heart failed him. Then why? Poirot asked softly. Was your stick lying beside him? Wren stiffened. Because some scoundrel planted it there. You think I'd leave my property by a corpse? Absurd. And yet, Poirot replied, you admitted earlier you disliked him, that he humiliated you before your peers. The colonel's jaw clenched. Dislike is not murder. Ah, mais oui. Yet sometimes dislike grows into resentment, resentment into rage. And rage, it is an untidy thing, Colonel. It loses order. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And you are a man of order, are you not? The colonel's silence was more telling than words. Dr. Whitby interjected smoothly. Monsieur Poirot, your speculations are colourful, but Sir Charles's death must have a medical explanation. I suspect cardiac failure precipitated by some sudden shock. We shall see when the surgeon arrives. Poirot's moustache twitched. Indeed, doctor, but you, who have studied the human body, you must know that sometimes a heart is stopped not by shock, but by intention. A draught, a powder, a subtle taste masked in wine. Whitby's eyes did not waver, but Poirot noticed how his fingers pressed together behind his back as though concealing their tremor. Marina Ashworth sat perfectly still, her profile composed as if carved from marble. Only her eyes betrayed her, luminous, watchful, darting swiftly whenever another spoke. When the silence pressed upon her, she said coldly, You probe as though you already know, Monsieur Poirot. If you have a theory, share it rather than tormenting us. Poirot bowed slightly. Madame, a theory, it is like a seed. If one plants it too soon, it will not grow. Better that I wait until the soil is ready. Felix Harrow leaned forward, his voice impatient. Enough riddles. What of this note? Who wrote it? That is the key. Find who sent for him, and you find the murderer. Poirot's eyes glimmered. Ah, monsieur, you make it sound so simple. But consider, if the murderer is clever, would he sign the note with his own initial? Or would he not prefer to cloak himself with another's letter? Harrow muttered. Then it could have been planted to incriminate Madame Ashworth. Or Miss Drake, Poirot added softly. Or anyone whose name begins with M, or even no one at all, merely the shadow of an M to mislead us. That is the danger of written words. They can lie more easily than the tongue. Inspector Mallory snapped his notebook shut. We're chasing phantoms. Until the surgeon confirms poison, this is smoke and mirrors. But I'll tell you this much. No one leaves Kensington Gardens tonight. You'll each be searched before you go. The announcement brought a stir of alarm, particularly from Victor Latham, whose sardonic mask faltered. You'll not paw through my belongings like a common thief's, he protested. You'll submit, Mallory said bluntly, or you'll spend the night in a cell. Poirot allowed Mallory's threat to settle before speaking again, his tone mild. Monsieur Latham protests, but it is natural. The guilty, they dislike scrutiny, but sometimes also the innocent protest, for they fear humiliation more than suspicion. That, too, is psychology. Lady Amelia, pale but resolute, spoke for the first time in many minutes. Monsieur Poirot, you said earlier the petal was curious, that it came from a rose not in my gardens. What do you mean? Poirot's eyes warmed with admiration. You are observant, Lady Amelia. Indeed, your roses are all pale, cream and pink, but the petal upon Sir Charles's cuff was dark, almost crimson, a colour not seen here tonight. Therefore, it was carried by someone from elsewhere. Perhaps it clung when two people brushed against one another. Perhaps it was placed deliberately. Either way, it is out of order, and disorder, madame, is always interesting. The guests shifted uneasily. None dared meet another's eyes. Poirot turned at last to Inspector Mallory. It is time, I think, that we separate our friends here. Let each be questioned privately. The group, it makes them cautious. Alone, they reveal themselves without knowing. Mallory nodded. Very well. Finch, show Miss Drake to the library. Latham can wait in the music room. The rest will remain here until called. As the guests began to disperse reluctantly, Poirot lingered by the window, gazing once more at the moonlit figure of Diana beyond the glass. An arrow pointed skyward, yet a man lies dead below, he murmured to himself. The symbolism, it is heavy, but always the truth hides not in the symbols, but in the small, untidy details. A missing cigar, a twisted glove, a borrowed stick, and a note that may be more lie than message. He turned back to the inspector with a serene smile. Come, Inspector. Let us hear what they say when the stage is smaller. The theatre of murder. It is best played in acts. And so began the next phase of the investigation. Not the broad gathering of suspects, but the careful unraveling of each, one by one, until the threads of deception could no longer hold. Hercule Poirot smoothed his moustache, his little grey cells already dancing with anticipation. The game of psychology had entered its second act, and already, he thought, the murderer's mask was beginning to crack. The library was a room of dark panelling and deeper shadows, lined with shelves that seemed to sigh beneath the weight of their leather-bound inhabitants. A single lamp glowed on the writing desk, casting an amber halo that failed to banish the corners. Poirot stood near the fire grate, which had gone cold, while Inspector Mallory occupied the desk like a magistrate. Miss Lila Drake, in her glittering gown that now seemed gaudy in the muted setting, perched uneasily upon a carved chair. She lit a fresh cigarette with shaking hands, though Poirot's lifted brow reminded her that smoking would only incriminate. With a sigh, she stubbed it out unlit. Mallory began without ceremony. You claim you went outside for a cigarette, alone. Latham followed. You quarrelled. Then you found Sir Charles. Why did you not raise the alarm immediately, but scream only after stepping closer? Lila's eyes flashed indignation. Because at first I thought he had fainted. It was dark. The lamps didn't reach him fully. Only when I saw his eyes open and fixed did I understand. I'm not a coward, Inspector, but I am human. Poirot stepped closer, folding his hands across his chest. Mademoiselle, you are an actress known. The stage, it teaches one to control the scream, to time it for effect. Yet you screamed here with no audience, except perhaps the murderer, who may have been close enough still to hear. Her face blanched, then hardened. Are you suggesting I timed it? That I discovered him already dead, waited, then screamed for drama? Not for drama, Poirot said softly, but perhaps for advantage. To be the one who discovers the body is to gain sympathy, yes? It is to seem innocent, and yet it is also to place oneself very near to the crime. Her composure wavered. She reached for her cigarette case again, then thought better of it. I swear to you, I did not kill Sir Charles. Did he admire me? Yes. Did I enjoy it? Perhaps. He was powerful. He gave me introductions. He bought tickets to my performances. But a lover. Number his wife suspected, perhaps, but it was not so. I would not ruin my career for a dalliance with a man twice my age. Poirot tilted his head, mustache gleaming in the lamplight. You're ambitious, mademoiselle. Ambition, it cuts both ways. It brings success, but it also brings enemies. Sir Charles, he promised you something, perhaps? A role, a patronage. And then, did he withdraw? Her eyes filled with sudden tears, angry and frustrated. Yes, he promised to fund my new production, then changed his mind last week. Said my talent needed no gilding. Do you know what that meant? That I must beg elsewhere, that I must be beholden to men like Latham, who sneer as they write checks. She pressed her lips together. I was furious, yes, but fury is not murder. Poirot bowed slightly. Ah, but sometimes fury, it is the seed. We shall see. He gestured politely to Mallory, who signaled Finch to escort Miss Drake back. When she had gone, Poirot murmured, "She is passionate, ambitious, easily wounded." She hated his betrayal, yet the hatred, I think, is not enough. Still, she is one piece upon the board. Mallory grunted. She could have slipped poison in his glass as easily as anyone. Perhaps, Poirot said, but let us hear the next act. The music room smelled faintly of polish and old ivory. Victor Latham lounged at the grand piano, tapping a discordant rhythm with 2 fingers, his expression sardonic as ever. "The Inquisition continues," he drawled. Mallory sat heavily. "Tell us what happened when you followed Miss Drake." "I told you," Latham said with a shrug. "I followed her because I was curious. She thrives on attention. I warned her not to court Ashworths. We exchanged sharp words. Then she screamed. That's all." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Monsieur, you are a man of the city, n'est-ce pas? You pride yourself on knowing secrets others do not. Tell me, what was Sir Charles' true financial state?" Latham's mouth curved. "Ah, so you noticed. He was on the brink, Monsieur Poirot. Oh, he concealed it well. New ventures, borrowed money, debts shuffled like cards. But those of us who read balance sheets as others read novels, we knew. Another year, perhaps less, and his empire would collapse. I dare say Harrow knew it too, though he pretended otherwise." Poirot's moustache twitched. "So, Monsieur Latham, his death, was it not convenient? Debts die with the debtor. Ruin disappears in the grave." For the first time, Latham's sneer faltered. "Convenient? Hardly. I had investments tied to his companies. His fall hurts me as well. Don't think I wished him dead, Poirot. If anything, I wished him alive long enough to pay me back." Poirot stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And yet, monsieur, I think you knew more of Sir Charles than finances. Perhaps you knew his secrets with women. Perhaps you knew whom he met in the gardens." Latham's eyes flickered. He leaned back, masking it with another grin. "I know many things, but knowledge is not murder." Poirot bowed slightly. "Perhaps not. Yet sometimes knowledge is the very weapon." Next was Colonel Wren, ushered into the library with the stiffness of a man who despised confinement. He stood at attention rather than sit. "I've told you my stick was stolen. I found it by the body only because some villain planted it there." Mallory eyed him. "You dislike Sir Charles. You admitted he humiliated you." Wren's face hardened. "Yes, he sneered at me. Said I'd wasted my commission, squandered opportunity. He laughed at my small pension. But that doesn't mean I murdered him." His voice cracked slightly, betraying emotion. "We fought at Mons together. I wouldn't kill him, not like this, skulking in gardens. If I'd wished it, I'd have called him out like a gentleman." Poirot's eyes softened. "Colonel, I believe you. You're a man of blunt anger, not subtlety. But still, the stick. It is a problem, n'est-ce pas? Someone wished it to speak for you when you could not." Wren scowled. "Then find who it was, Poirot, for I'll not hang for another's trick." Poirot inclined his head. "Rest assured, Colonel, I intend precisely that." Dr. Whitby entered next, his pale eyes cool and precise. He sat with deliberate calm, hands folded. "Doctor," Poirot said quietly, "you were quick to say there was no wound. You suspected poison at once. Tell me, why?" Whitby's lips curved faintly. "Because I am a physician, Monsieur Poirot. Experience teaches us to see what others cannot." "And yet," Poirot said, "when the inspector remarked he smelt something unusual, your eyes betrayed recognition. What was it, doctor? A chemical? A drug?" Whitby's composure faltered just long enough. "It may have been chloroform or ether, hard to say, but certainly nothing I administered." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Chloroform, it stuns. It does not kill. But in combination with another substance, perhaps." Whitby leaned forward. "If you mean to accuse me, do so outright." Poirot smiled mildly. "I accuse no one yet. But I observe, doctor, that your knowledge is very exact. Too exact, perhaps, for a man who claims to have noticed nothing." Finally, Marina Ashworth. The widow swept in like a pale spectre, her gown whispering along the carpet. She sat gracefully, hands folded, every line of her figure composed. "Madame," Poirot said softly, "grief is hard, but truth is harder still. You quarreled with your husband tonight." Her eyes glittered. "Yes, he was cruel. He mocked me before others. He drank too much. He accused me of frivolity, but still, he was my husband. Do you think I would kill him for wounding my pride?" Poirot's voice lowered. "Not for pride, perhaps, but for freedom, for inheritance, or perhaps for love elsewhere." Her composure cracked just for an instant as her gaze darted toward Dr. Whitby. Poirot saw it. Mallory saw it. "Ah," Poirot murmured. "So the truth begins to breathe. You deny the note? You deny the meeting?" "I deny everything," she said fiercely, then rose, her breath quickened. "You have no right." Poirot bowed. "Forgive me, madame. I intrude upon your sorrow, but remember, sorrow can be honest, or it can be convenient. Which is yours?" She swept out without replying. When the interviews were finished, Poirot remained by the saltier, cold hearth, his eyes half closed. Mallory looked at him expectantly. "Well, do you know?" Poirot's voice was soft, reflective. "I know only this, Inspector. The murderer is clever. He uses appearances like masks. He hides behind initials, behind borrowed sticks, behind missing cigars. But already the mask slips. The psychology, it betrays. Madame Ashworth loves too fiercely, the doctor knows too much, the actress weeps too easily, the colonel protests too loudly, the financier twitches with guilt, and the cynic, he sneers to cover fear. One of them lies, one of them killed, and soon, with order, we shall see which." Mallory frowned. "But which one, Poirot?" Poirot opened his eyes, which glittered with certainty not yet shared. "Patience, Inspector. The little grey cells are at work. The garden yields its secrets slowly. Tomorrow, when the dawn comes upon Kensington, perhaps it will shine also upon the truth." And with that, Hercule Poirot smoothed his mustache and prepared for the next act of his psychological game. A game that would end only when the murderer could no longer bear the weight of their own deception. The long night at Lady Amelia's estate stretched onward, the hours ticking with the relentless patience of a metronome. The guests, now scattered through the great house, endured a sleepless confinement. Guards had been posted at the exits. Footmen tiptoed nervously with trays of tea that remained largely untouched. The conservatory's glow dimmed into uneasy shadows as the hours passed. Poirot, however, seemed untouched by fatigue. He sat in a high-backed chair near the bay window, hands steepled, eyes closed, not sleeping but thinking, arranging facts with the meticulous care of a jeweler setting stones. Beside him, Inspector Mallory leaned against the mantel, muttering into his notebook, His blunt energy chafed against Poirot's patience. "At this rate, Poirot, we've a circle of suspects, but no murder weapon, no confession, and no clarity," Mallory grumbled. "The surgeon's not yet arrived, and without confirmation of poison or otherwise, we are grasping at shadows." Poirot opened one eye. "Ah, but shadows. They are most revealing. One sees not the object, but its shape, its outline, distorted. Yet from distortion one may learn much. You look only for the weapon, Inspector. I look for the mind behind it." Mallory snorted. "Your psychology again." Poirot smiled faintly. "Always. For the truth, it is written upon the soul of man, not in the dust, not in the fingerprints, but in the words, in the silences, in the gestures too small to notice." As if summoned, Finch the butler entered discreetly. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Mallory, the staff have completed the list you requested. I have here the names of all who moved in and out of the conservatory between 9:30 and the time of the scream." Poirot extended a delicate hand. "Merci, Finch." He scanned the paper, lips moving silently. Then he nodded. "As I thought." Mallory crossed the room impatiently. "Well, out with it." Poirot tapped the list. "Observe. Madame Ashworth left at 9:35, returned just before the cry. Mademoiselle Drake left at 9:50. Monsieur Latham followed 1 minute later. Colonel Wren prowled the cloakroom corridor at the same time. Dr. Whitby slipped into the library, alone, he claims. Monsieur Harrow remained with Lady Amelia. That is the order." Mallory frowned. "And what does that prove?" "That," Poirot said gently, "the murderer had but 10 minutes in which to act, and that his opportunity overlaps precisely with those who are unaccounted for. Madame Ashworth, Mademoiselle Drake, Monsieur Latham, Colonel Wren, and Dr. Whitby. 5 pieces upon the board, Inspector. The others, they are safe." "Safe," Mallory muttered, "until proven otherwise." Poirot rose, smoothed his moustache. "Come, Inspector. Let us return to the scene. The garden. She may yet whisper to us." The night air outside was cold, crisp, tinged with the faint perfume of roses. The path where Sir Charles had fallen was cordoned by chairs, as Poirot had requested. The body itself had been removed to a private chamber, but the marks remained, the disturbed gravel, the absence of ash, the faint smudge near the rose bed where the note had been found. Poirot paced with care, his polished shoes never straying beyond the path. "Look," Mallory muttered, crouching to inspect the ground. "The gravel's scuffed here. Struggle, perhaps." Poirot shook his head. "No, not struggle. See, the marks are shallow, brushed aside as if someone tidied. No scuffle, no desperate movement. Sir Charles," he fell quietly, "swiftly. That is the signature of poison." Mallory grimaced. "You may be right, but where was it given?" Poirot pointed toward the conservatory. "At the toast, perhaps, or later in some private moment. But mark you, the cigar. He held it when last seen. He did not when found. That cigar, it troubles me." "Because it vanished?" "Because it was taken," Poirot said gravely. "If Sir Charles smoked only half of it, and death came suddenly, it should have been found near him. Instead, nothing. Why? Unless the cigar itself was the instrument of death." Mallory blinked. "Poison in the cigar?" "Exactment. A leaf treated, a tip laced with venom. Sir Charles smokes. He inhales death. No trace left, save the missing stub, carried away by a careful hand." The inspector whistled low. That would explain the suddenness. Poirot's eyes gleamed, and the murderer's cleverness. For all eyes would look to the glass, the toast, the wine, not to the cigar. And who, among our guests, would know such a method? Mallory's gaze darkened. "Whitby." Poirot inclined his head, but did not answer. Instead he crouched, brushing the gravel gently, aside with a gloved finger. A single object, half buried, revealed itself, a match broken at the stem. Poirot held it delicately. A match, discarded. Too small, too ordinary, but it tells a story. Someone lit a cigar. Someone dropped the match here, before Sir Charles fell. Yet no ash remains. The cigar, it was taken away. The match, it remained. Order broken, Inspector. That is the clue. He slipped it into an envelope and straightened. His gaze drifted toward the bronze statue of Diana, gleaming coldly in the moonlight. And there, too, is disorder. The note spoke of Diana at 10. Yet no one admits to waiting there. Someone lured Sir Charles with a promise. Someone who knew he could be persuaded. Mallory exhaled sharply. So we have a poisoned cigar, a missing stub, a note pointing to Diana, and half a dozen liars. Which of them is it, Poirot? Poirot's moustache twitched. Ah, but patience. The guilty, they betray themselves not in the act, but in the aftermath. Already they grow restless. Soon they will err. The following morning, pale sunlight filtered through Kensington Gardens, casting long shadows across the lawns. The guests, weary from their enforced confinement, gathered again in the conservatory, their faces drawn, their tempers frayed. Lady Amelia presided like a weary queen, porcelain composure concealing a storm beneath. Poirot addressed them with a courteous bow. Mesdames et messieurs, forgive the inconvenience of last night, but we are nearer to the truth. Sir Charles was not struck, nor did he stumble. He was poisoned, and the poison, I believe, was concealed in his cigar. Gasps rippled through the group. Marina Ashworth pressed a gloved hand to her lips. Colonel Wren muttered a curse. Poirot raised a hand. Who among you had access to his cigars? Who might tamper with them unseen? All eyes turned inevitably toward Dr. Whitby. His expression remained calm, though his pallor betrayed strain. I am a physician, yes, but I had no interest in Sir Charles's cigars. I never touched them. Yet, Poirot said smoothly, you were in the library adjoining the conservatory, a place through which Sir Charles passed, a place where a box of cigars might be left, even for a moment. And you, Doctor, were most precise in speaking of poisons last night. Whitby's eyes narrowed. You twist words, Poirot. Many substances could cause sudden collapse. You cannot prove it was a cigar. Poirot smiled faintly. Not yet. But already you betray yourself. You know too much of what was not yet revealed. Felix Harrow interjected suddenly, his voice sharp. If Whitby is guilty, what of the widow? She loathed her husband. We all saw her glances. She had more reason than any. Marina turned on him, her eyes flashing. And you, Mr. Harrow? How convenient his death when you fought over control of the charity. With Sir Charles gone, you command the board. Lila Drake laughed bitterly. Listen to yourselves. Every one of us had reason to hate him. He was cruel, domineering, arrogant, but only one of us stooped to murder. Poirot spread his hands, serene amid the storm. Precisely, mademoiselle. Each of you had motive. Many had opportunity, but only one had the psychology. They stared at him, confused, fearful, angry. Poirot's gaze lingered on each, his eyes alight with certainty he would not yet share. Patience, he murmured again. The truth is like the dawn. It comes whether we wish it or not. And soon, mes amis, very soon, the sun will rise upon the murderer. And as silence fell, broken only by the faint rustle of the roses beyond the glass, each guest felt the invisible net drawing tighter, each suspect caught in the inexorable order of Hercule Poirot's little grey cells. The conservatory that morning had the air of a theatre in which all the actors had forgotten their lines. They shifted restlessly in their seats, glances darting like nervous birds, voices lowered but strained. What had begun as a glittering society gathering now resembled a court of judgment, the chandelier above a great, unblinking eye. Poirot stood before them, perfectly composed, his patent leather shoes shining, his mustache immaculate, his expression serene. Yet there was a quiet gravity in his manner that made each guest feel the weight of scrutiny pressing on them. Inspector Mallory paced like a bulldog, his notes clutched in a heavy hand. "My friends," Poirot began, his voice gentle yet clear, "we are, as you say in this country, at the heart of the labyrinth. The body of Sir Charles speaks not through wounds but through absence, an absence of cigar ash, of the stub itself, of disorder. He was felled by poison, most cunningly administered, I believe, through the very cigar he enjoyed. And yet," he lifted a finger, "it is not enough to know how he died. We must know why and by whose hand. For poison is always the weapon of psychology, not of passion. It requires planning, patience, intellect, and it is chosen by one who fears direct confrontation." A murmur rippled through the group. Colonel Wren scowled, folding his arms like a barricade. Marina Ashworth sat rigid, her hands clasped too tightly in her lap. Lila Drake leaned forward, eager, perhaps too eager, to see someone else accused. Mallory barked, "We'll get to the bottom of it soon enough. One of you had access to that cigar, one of you slipped poison into it, and until you come clean, you'll all remain under guard." Poirot raised a hand delicately. "Patience, Inspector. To accuse in haste is to err, better to listen, to see. Already the guilty one has betrayed himself, or herself, many times." He began to move slowly before the semicircle of suspects, his voice weaving calm logic into the oppressive silence. "Let us consider, one by one. Monsieur Harrow, our financier, you quarreled with Sir Charles about money. Yes. You feared his reckless schemes would ruin your accounts. Yet, your anger is that of a man who values numbers, not blood. You would crush him in a boardroom, perhaps, but not upon a garden path." Harrow shifted uncomfortably, his lip twitching. Poirot gave a small nod, as if dismissing him for the moment. "Colonel Wren, brave soldier, humiliated by Sir Charles. Your stick was found beside him, a false clue to draw suspicion. You are a man of directness. To strike in fury with your hands, yes, but to poison a cigar? Non. The method is too sly for you. You are used to facing an enemy, not tricking him." The colonel's face flushed with offended pride, but Poirot continued without pause. "Mademoiselle Drake, the actress, you had ambition and you were betrayed when Sir Charles withdrew his patronage. Your heart, it burned with anger, I do not doubt. And yet, your anger is of the instant, the dramatic gesture. To scream, to weep, to quarrel. But to plan poison, to steal a cigar and lace it with death, it does not suit your temperament. You lack the patience for such a murder." Lila stiffened, but her eyes flickered with relief as Poirot's gaze moved on. Victor Latham, cynical, sneering, with the eye of the financier who sees ruin before others. "You knew of Sir Charles's debts, you spoke of them openly. Yet what did you stand to gain from his death? Your investments vanish, your money is lost. You had reason to hate him, yes, but not to kill him. You profit more from his life than from his death." Latham shrugged, though unease tightened his mouth. Poirot's tone softened as he reached Lady Amelia. "Our gracious hostess, who gave us this evening of splendor. You have much to lose in scandal, but nothing to gain in Sir Charles's death. You are, I think, more troubled by the presence of murder in your gardens than by Sir Charles's absence from them." Lady Amelia inclined her head gravely, her eyes grateful for the absolution. Poirot stopped before Marina Ashworth, his voice lowered, intimate, piercing. "Madame, you quarreled with your husband. You longed, perhaps, for freedom, from his cruelty, from his mockery, from the shadow he cast. You had motive, yes, but your manner, it is proud, brittle. You would wound him with words, with disdain, not with secret poison. And yet, there is something. Your glance, when I spoke with Dr. Whitby, betrayed a link, a sympathy. perhaps more than sympathy. Marina's face blanched. Her eyes darted toward Whitby, then away. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound emerged. Poirot turned at last to the doctor. His eyes were cool, his moustache immaculate, but his voice sharpened. "Doctor." "Whitby, you alone among us spoke too soon of poison. You alone understood the smell upon the air. You are learned, precise, calm. You would know how to prepare such a trap. The cigar laced with toxin, the stub carried away, the match broken and discarded. Your knowledge betrays you." Whitby's expression did not flicker. "I'm a physician. Of course I considered poison. But knowledge is not guilt." Poirot inclined his head. "Ah, but psychology. Psychology is guilt. You betrayed yourself when the inspector mentioned smell. You betrayed yourself when Marina looked at you with more than fear, and you betrayed yourself when you said last night, chloroform or ether. For who but the guilty knows what was present when no one else could name it?" For the first time, Whitby's calm cracked. His pale eyes flashed with sudden heat. "You are twisting shadows into ropes, Poirot. I had no quarrel with Sir Charles." Poirot's voice became silk over steel. "No quarrel? But you had something far stronger, a bond with his wife, a bond that promised happiness only if Sir Charles were gone. Madame Ashworth seeks freedom. You, doctor, seek her. Together, perhaps, you sought more than freedom. You sought release, and you sought it through death." A gasp went round the room. Marina half rose, her face stricken. "No," she cried. "You must not." Poirot lifted a hand. "I accuse you of nothing, madame. I state only what the eyes reveal. The heart? That is another matter. But tell me, when you quarreled with your husband, did he not threaten you with words? Did he not say you would never be free?" Her silence was answer enough. Poirot let the weight of it hang, then turned away, smoothing his moustache. "We are close, mes amis. Very close. The murderer stands among us, and soon the truth will no longer hide. For the smallest clue, the missing cigar, cannot vanish forever. It must appear again, and when it does, the murderer will be revealed." Inspector Mallory barked, "We'll search the house again from top to bottom. If the cigar was hidden, we'll find it." Poirot smiled faintly. "Perhaps, Inspector. But more often than not, the cigar is hidden not in the house, but in the heart, and that, mes amis, I shall uncover." The group sat in a silence heavy as iron. Each face showed guilt of one kind or another, guilt of ambition, guilt of resentment, guilt of love. But only one carried the guilt of murder, and Poirot, calm and unhurried, was drawing the net ever tighter. Outside, in the gardens, Diana's bronze bow gleamed in the pale sunlight, her arrow forever aimed at the heavens. Beneath her gaze, the players waited for the next move in Poirot's inexorable game. And within the quiet of his mind, the little grey cells danced, fitting each piece into place, readying themselves for the moment when Poirot would gather them all and reveal the truth. The morning dragged on in heavy silence, each tick of the long case clock in Lady Amelia's hallway seeming louder than the last. Though the sun filtered weakly through the tall conservatory windows, it brought no warmth to the gathering. The air remained thick with suspicion, like a storm waiting to break. Poirot, immaculate as ever, had not slept. His shoes gleamed as brightly as at midnight, his moustache was faultless, but his eyes were sharp, alive with an inner fire. He moved slowly about the room, pausing here and there to adjust a chair slightly out of line or to straighten a vase on a table. These small acts of order seemed insignificant to the others, but Inspector Mallory knew better. Each gesture meant Poirot was thinking. "Poirot," Mallory growled at last, "we've gone round in circles all night. We know it was poison, very likely in the cigar, but we've no proof. No cigar stub, no vial of toxin, no confession. What more can we do but wait for the surgeon? Poirot raised a delicate hand. Non, mon ami. To wait is to risk the truth escaping. The murderer grows restless. Already the psychology reveals cracks. We must tighten the circle further. Lady Amelia, pale but composed, stood from her chair. Monsieur Poirot, Inspector, whatever you must do, I beg you do it quickly. This house cannot endure such tension. Every servant whispers, every guest trembles. The scandal grows with every hour. Poirot bowed gravely. You are correct, madame. The time has come for a new approach. We shall not simply ask questions. We shall observe reactions. It is not the words but the tremors beneath them that betray the truth. Mallory frowned. What do you mean? Poirot smiled faintly. A small experiment, Inspector. We will present each suspect with a fragment of truth. Something close, but not complete. The innocent will remain calm. The guilty will betray themselves. The suspects were summoned once more, assembled in the conservatory beneath the gleaming chandelier. They looked exhausted, their faces pale from sleeplessness, their tempers frayed. Poirot stood before them, calm and commanding. My friends, he began, the little grey cells have considered much. A picture begins to form, but still there are gaps. So I propose a small exercise. I will speak of certain facts. Facts about last night, about Sir Charles, about each of you. I ask you to listen in silence, for truth reveals itself in silence. The guests shifted uneasily. Mallory folded his arms, watching them keenly. Poirot began with Felix Harrow. Monsieur Harrow, you argued with Sir Charles over the charity. He humiliated you in front of Lady Amelia, and you feared his reckless business schemes would destroy your reputation. You might have wished him dead, yes? Harrow stiffened, his lip twitching as always. Yes, I hated him, but I would never stoop to murder. Poirot merely nodded and moved on. Colonel Wren, your stick, it was found beside the body. A false clue, but an effective one. You were humiliated by Sir Charles, mocked for your failures. You're a man of anger, quick to defend your honor. But your anger, it is blunt, not subtle enough for poison. Wren bristled, but the faintest relief flickered across his features at the implied dismissal. Poirot turned to Lila Drake. Mademoiselle Drake, the actress. You were betrayed when Sir Charles withdrew his patronage. You quarreled with Victor Latham outside, moments before the cry. And you were the first to discover him dead. A most unfortunate position. Lila's cheeks flamed. I did not kill him. Yes, I hated him for ruining me, but I only found him. You must believe me. Poirot raised a placating hand. Perhaps. We shall see. Then to Victor Latham. Monsieur Latham, you knew Sir Charles's empire was crumbling. You had money tied to him, money you might never see again. His death erases debts, but ruins investments. You profit little, yet you sneer much. Perhaps you sneer because you fear. Latham's grin faltered for the first time. He looked away, his jaw tightening. Poirot let the silence draw tight before he faced Marina Ashworth. Madame Ashworth, your husband mocked you, humiliated you. You longed for freedom, and perhaps you longed for love elsewhere. Her composure wavered. Her eyes darted, as before, to Dr. Whitby. Poirot saw it, and so did everyone else. Finally, Poirot's gaze fell on the doctor. His voice became cold, precise. Doctor. Whitby. You knew too much. You spoke of poison before it was confirmed. You recognized the scent of chloroform in the air, and you have knowledge of subtle methods. Knowledge no one else here possesses. If anyone could poison a cigar, it is you. The conservatory erupted in murmurs, but Poirot raised his voice, silencing them. Now, observe, mes amis. Observe the faces, the eyes, the hands. Who betrays fear? Who betrays anger? Who betrays guilt? All eyes turned. Marina Ashworth trembled visibly, her hands clenched. Whitby sat rigid, pale, but his jaw was set in defiance. Harrow twitched. Lila wept softly. Latham sneered again, but the sweat at his brow gleamed under the chandelier. Poirot's eyes narrowed. It is enough. Already the truth breathes. We are close. Later, when the group dispersed under guard once more, Poirot conferred quietly with Mallory. They stood by the tall windows, the garden beyond bright with cold autumn sunlight. "You saw it, Inspector?" Poirot asked. Mallory frowned. "I saw a group of guilty-looking people, yes, but nothing conclusive. They all had reason to hate him." Poirot shook his head. "Non, non. It is not the hatred that matters. It is the contradiction. Marina looks too often to Whitby. Latham sneers, but sweats. Harrow twitches not from fear, but from pride. Drake weeps too quickly, too perfectly. And Whitby, Whitby is calm when he should rage, and defensive when he should be calm. These are the patterns. Psychology, mon ami, always psychology." Mallory scowled. "Then you believe Whitby guilty?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "I believe Whitby knows. Whether he killed or whether he covers for another, that is the final question. But soon the answer will come." As evening fell, Poirot requested one last gathering. The guests returned, weary and resentful, to the conservatory. A storm rattled faintly at the windows, the wind moaning in the chimneys. The chandelier's light glowed against the encroaching darkness. Poirot stood once more before them, hands folded neatly. His voice was quiet, but every ear strained to hear. "Mes amis, we approach the end. Sir Charles Ashworth was lured to the gardens by a note, perhaps genuine, perhaps false. There, he smoked a cigar laced with poison. Death came swiftly, silently. The stub was removed, the match broken and left behind. And around him, many suspects, each with motive, each with opportunity, but only one with the psychology of such a crime." He paused, letting his words fall like stones into water. The ripples spread across the room, nervous glances, tightened hands, averted eyes. "Tomorrow morning," Poirot said softly, "I shall call you all together for the final time. Then I will reveal the murderer. Until then, sleep if you can. But know this, the truth already stands among us. It merely waits for me to put it in order." The room was silent. Only the ticking of the great clock broke the hush, its pendulum swinging steadily, mercilessly, counting down the hours until Poirot would deliver his judgment. And as each guest withdrew, heavy with dread, Poirot remained in the conservatory, gazing out toward the statue of Diana. The huntress's arrow gleamed in the stormlight, aimed forever at the sky. Beneath her cold gaze, Poirot whispered to himself, "The bow is drawn. Tomorrow it strikes the guilty heart." The storm that had gathered through the night spent itself by dawn, leaving the air sharp and clear above Kensington Gardens. The lawns glittered with raindrops, and the bronze figure of Diana, bow still poised eternally toward the heavens, gleamed as though freshly polished. In Lady Amelia's conservatory, the household and its unwilling guests assembled one last time. Fatigue lay heavy upon them, but beneath it beat a more urgent tension, anticipation, dread. They sat in silence, the faint chime of the clock marking the moment. Poirot entered, immaculate as ever, his mustache glistening, his patent leather shoes untouched by the storm. He bowed slightly to Lady Amelia, then surveyed the faces before him, drawn, expectant, fearful. "Mesdames, messieurs," he began softly, "the time has come to put in order what has until now been disorder. Sir Charles Ashworth is dead, not by chance, not by the hand of God, but by the hand of one among us. And that hand betrayed itself not in violence, but in psychology." A shudder ran through the assembly. Inspector Mallory stood at Poirot's side, notebook ready but eyes fixed on the Belgian. Poirot clasped his hands. "First, let us consider the method. Sir Charles did not fall by blow or by blade. He died suddenly, silently, with no sign of struggle. There was no glass spilled, no food unfinished. But there was a cigar. He was seen smoking it after the toast, yet when found, it had vanished. That cigar, mes amis, was the weapon. Poisoned with a subtle tincture, its smoke carried death into his lungs. The missing stub was removed to conceal the truth." He allowed the words to sink in. Marina Ashworth shifted in her seat, pale as marble. Dr. Whitby sat very still, his face a mask. Poirot went on. "Now, the note. Diana, 10. Come alone. M. A crude ruse. It mattered not who wrote it, only that it lured Sir Charles into the garden at precisely the time his cigar would complete its deadly work. And the letter M? Ah, that is the beauty. It points to Marina, to Mademoiselle Drake, even to money itself. A false clue, designed to scatter suspicion." Victor Latham scoffed, but Poirot's gaze silenced him. Then, the psychology. "Consider each of you. Monsieur Harrow, you twitched with resentment, but numbers are your battlefield, not poison. Colonel Wren, hot-headed, direct, humiliated by Sir Charles, yes, but incapable of such sly subtlety. Mademoiselle Drake, you wept too readily, but your ambition is for applause, not for murder in the shadows. Monsieur Latham, cynical, but your loss in his death outweighed any gain. Lady Amelia, concerned only for scandal, not for revenge." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "That leaves two. Madame Ashworth, the unhappy wife, and Dr. Whitby, the physician." The conservatory held its breath. Marina's hands trembled in her lap. Whitby's face grew colder, his pale eyes like glass. Poirot's voice deepened. Madame Ashworth had motive. Freedom from her husband's cruelty, perhaps love elsewhere. But she lacks the knowledge. She would not think to poison a cigar, to remove the stub, to speak of chloroform in the air. No, she could not. He turned, mustache gleaming, toward the doctor. "But you, Dr. Whitby, you could. You alone noticed the scent none else detected. You alone spoke of chloroform and ether before any test confirmed it. You alone possess the skill to lace a cigar with death, and the composure to sit calmly beside the corpse you created." Whitby's jaw tightened, his fingers flexing once against his chair. Poirot's voice became steel. "And yet, it is not only your knowledge that condemns you, it is your psychology. When I spoke of poison, you defended yourself before I accused you. When I questioned Marina, her eyes fled to yours. You betrayed each other with every glance. You killed Sir Charles because he stood between you and the woman you desired. You wished to free her and yourself, but, Doctor, freedom built upon murder is only another prison." A sharp cry escaped Marina's lips. "Jasper," she began, but Whitby's hand rose swiftly, silencing her. His composure cracked at last. "Yes," he said harshly, "I did it. For her. Charles Ashworth was a tyrant, a brute. He crushed her with his mockery, his control. He deserved to die. I gave him a death swift and painless, a mercy compared to the cruelty he inflicted." Marina covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Lady Amelia gasped. The others stared, aghast at the calm confession. Poirot shook his head gently. "Non, monsieur. You tell yourself it was mercy, but it was selfishness. You killed not for her sake, but for your own desire. You wished to possess her, and so you removed the obstacle. That is not love, it is vanity." Mallory snapped the cuffs open with a clink of steel. "Dr. Jasper Whitby, I am arresting you for the murder of Sir Charles Ashworth." Whitby did not resist. He stood, straight-backed, as though still in his consulting room, and allowed himself to be led away. Marina's sobs filled the silence he left behind. Poirot smoothed his mustache, his eyes thoughtful. So often the criminal tells himself a story to make his deed noble. But in the end, it is always the same, a lie to soothe a guilty heart. One may murder with science, with intellect, with poison hidden in a cigar, but one cannot murder with love. Love does not kill. Lady Amelia rose, her face pale but steady. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "you have saved my house from scandal, though not from sorrow. How can I thank you?" Poirot bowed. "Madame, I ask no thanks. I ask only that you remember. Murder, it does not come from hatred alone. It comes also from love twisted into selfishness. That is the tragedy." He turned toward the tall windows. Beyond, Diana's arrow gleamed in the pale morning light. Poirot gazed at it for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Justice," he murmured, "always strikes its mark." And with that, Hercule Poirot, having restored order from chaos once more, took up his hat and cane and departed with the serene composure of a man whose little grey cells had done their work to perfection.